千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. So it looks like we'll have a chance to dig into the sections, the sectional analysis of 27. This I enjoy doing because it is not something that I have seen any other book on the Tao Te Ching provide. So you can literally think of this as, we are working with the original text. And I know that people will say, well, but most of the people listening to this talk, they can't really read the original Chinese. So how is that working with the original text? Well, we all work with the original text regardless of our knowledge of ancient Chinese, because there's a lot that we can tell just by looking for similar characters in a visual way. So let's start with 27. As usual, I'm going to read it from beginning to end, and then I will start pointing out the characters that repeat themselves in the original ancient Chinese. Tao Te Ching 27. Good traveling does not leave tracks. Good speech does not seek faults. Good reckoning does not use counters. Good closure needs no bar and yet cannot be opened. Good knot needs no rope and yet cannot be untied. Therefore, sages often save others, and so do not abandon anyone. They often say things, and so do not abandon anything. This is called following enlightenment. Therefore, the good person is the teacher of the bad person. The bad person is the resource of the good person. Those who do not value their teachers and do not love their resources, although intelligent, they are greatly confused. This is called the essential wonder. Okay, this particular chapter is full of interesting concepts. We will begin to tackle it with identification of repeating characters throughout the chapter. So take a look at my first example of repeating characters. The characters highlighted in red, you can tell that they are all the same and they repeat themselves from 1 to 5, from line 1 to line 5. When you look at the English translation, you will see that the first word, good, is also repeated from line 1 to line 5. So that gives you a pretty good idea already what that character means. So let's go ahead and identify 1 to 5 as a section on its own. Once we have done so, I would also point out that there's actually more repeating characters in that 5 lines, in the first 5 lines. I'll highlight those and then I will explain. So the third character in line 1, 2, 4, and 5 are the same and in the same position. So there is a break from that in line 3. So that particular character, wu, means to have none, to not have. And it turns out that the character that we have in 3, that just means no or not. So it's 2 characters being used in a similar way. So it's actually the same, even though it's not the same character. And then let me also point out that line 4 and 5 are very similar, even more similar than the other lines, because they have the same length, they have the same number of characters, and they have more repeating characters toward the end. So they can be seen as a couplet. And you can tell by reading the translation, it's about good closure, good knot, about bars, about ropes, bar for closing the door, the knot for tying the rope. So these two lines are both using something physical, you know, the bar, the door, the knots, the ropes. They're using something physical to metaphorically speak to something that is intangible. So we'll get to that when the time comes. For now, though, let's continue to explore the different sections. Take a look from line 6 onward. So if you look at if you just go not by the characters, but by the translation, you can see that after we're done talking about good traveling, good speech, good reckoning, good closure, good knot, we switch gears into sages saving others, saving people, not abandoning anyone, not abandoning people, saving things, not abandoning things, and this is called following enlightenment. So you can pretty much tell that's a coherent single thought, like a paragraph, and therefore we can put a line there as well. That's another section, even though it's not marked as such. And it makes sense also because 11 and 12, we get into this whole thing about the good person and the bad person. So more about that in just a moment. Let's examine this guess about lines 6 to 10 being one complete section. And we can see that there's actually quite a few repeating characters to identify. So I want to start out by pointing to the first two characters in line 7 and line 9. Notice they are exactly the same. Now, line 8 is different. The first two characters are different, but they correspond to the first two characters in the second half of line 6, as you can see here. So in reality, what we have here is an A-B-A-B structure. Then also take a look at how the last character of 6 is the same as the last character of 7. In a similar way, last character of 8 is the same as last character of 9. Then we also have the ABAB in the next to last character. We have save, abandon, save, abandon. So looking at it that way, we can be pretty sure that this is a section by itself. So we haven't made a mistake here at all. Let's move on. So to wrap it up, we have a concluding section. It starts out with the two lines, as I mentioned, that was also a couplet. They're structurally similar in a poetic way, and we have repeating characters here, quite a few repeating characters. And it's about the good person being the teacher of the bad person being the resource of the good person. So that can be two lines on their own. But then it continues on talking about valuing your teachers and loving your resources. So it's got to be included as the same section. And then lastly, we have commentaries about how if you don't value teachers and love resources, well, you're just confused. And then the conclusion, this is called the essential wonder. I think you can probably figure out The reason why it's called the essential wonder, because if you look around, most of the time, you're going to see that people respect the good person as the teacher, but they usually are disdainful of the bad person. You know, if someone is not so great, then people tend to look down on that person. You know, people tend to not be real kind toward the bad person. But Lao Tzu here is saying that, well, you got to value the good, but also the bad. What he's going to get to is that you can learn from the good explicitly, and you can learn from the bad people by using them as counterexamples. Therefore, they become a resource to draw from. And that's why, at the end of the day, you have to have this positive attitude about everybody. I know that's easier said than done. I think a lot of times we would all tend to look across the political divide and cast the other side in sort of a very negative fashion. We would tend to demonize the other side. So Lao Tzu is telling us to not do that. That if you did do that, many of us are guilty of it, then we may be intelligent, but greatly confused. We're confused about the essential humanity of our fellow human beings. All right, so let's move on. We're ready now to dive into the first couple of lines before we continue on and take our mid-meeting break. So let's start with the first section. So this character that I said corresponds to good in the translation. It's san. What does it mean? It means good. That's no surprise. But it means good in a specific context, the context of being skillful. So we ourselves, in speaking English, we use the English word good in a similar way. We may say someone is good, as in that person, like when we say he's a good person, we're talking about like moral excellence. That person is very moral, very ethical, very virtuous. So excellence in that regard. But we also use the word good in different ways. We oftentimes say someone is good at something. So when I say someone is good at math, I don't necessarily mean that this person is a good, virtuous, ethical person. I'm just talking about his or her math skills to be good at math. In a similar way, I might say, oh, that person is good with electronics. That would have nothing to do with morality or ethics or virtues. I'm just saying that this particular person, good at electronics, has skills, has knowledge, has experience dealing with electronics. In a similar way, when I say someone is good with people, I just mean that person is able to handle people skillfully, communicate with people effectively, and so on. So the extra importance of this context in Tao cultivation is that the Tao is a skill, just like math skills or electronics knowledge or any other domain of knowledge that you can learn. It's something to learn, and more importantly, is something to practice. So whatever skills you may possess, perhaps you are a musician and you play the piano, well then you know that the skill has to be constantly polished, constantly maintained and kept up with regular practice. So Laozi is basically saying that the Tao is the same way. It's something that you can learn, but also it's something that you have to practice. You have to keep it up. You have to continuously do it, or the skill will become rusty. The more you practice, the better you get at it. So I think that part is pretty clear. So next, let's start utilizing this good or skillful concept and apply it to different things. So let us, for instance, talk about 善行, good traveling. So here, because the Tao Te Ching itself is so heavily metaphorical, you can pretty easily figure out that good traveling is not about physical traveling in the material world. It refers to the journey of life. So in that kind of traveling, Tao cultivators are skillful travelers. That is to say, due to experience and study, Tao cultivators are in the know when it comes to traveling the journey of life. They know where the scenic routes begin. They know the best places to stay along the way, the best sights to see, the best restaurants to try, etc. The best way to enjoy the journey. When they come to a fork in the road, they also have the experience to pick the correct path. So think about all the times in your life when you've come to a fork in the road and you're not quite sure which is the way to go. So the experience, the skill in traveling the journey of life will come in handy in a situation like that. So let's go a little bit further to apply this idea of being good or being skillful at traveling the journey of life. When we say someone is good at traveling that particular journey, what we mean are specific things. From a Tao context, these are the people that in life will often use a light touch. And when I say a light touch, I'm not talking about light in the same context as 26. In 26, to be light, to be a lightweight, is to be superficial, is to be unstable. Here, when I say use a light touch, I mean a soft touch. I mean being gentle rather than being heavy-handed. So you can easily imagine someone, an experienced cultivator of the Tao, or perhaps a Tao master, who is very thoughtful, very considerate, and yet will provide advice in a very gentle and soft way. And that will be a light touch, but it will result from serious consideration, which in a previous chapter in 26, Laozi will characterize as heavy. So I hope you understand the different contexts that I'm using here for the same English word, light. So in a similar way, cultivators who are skillful travelers, they know how to get the most with the least. That is, accomplish the most, get the most benefits with the least amount of effort, with minimal actions. The unskillful cultivator of the Tao will literally drive themselves to fatigue, tire themselves out, expend a lot of effort, and end up with very little or poor results. So that would be the opposite. So oftentimes, least effort will be the light touch, which in this case means like a gentle touch, the soft touch. In life, I think we have all seen examples where something little makes a big difference. That's the Tao. A gentle word, a gentle encouragement causes someone to gain all the motivation they need to do something great. So that would be the Tao. That would be skillful traveling. So in doing all this, Tao cultivators have no need to draw attention to themselves. They don't bother trying to hide either, but they don't advertise what they're trying to do. They don't try to make sure that what they do is visible to as many people as possible. They just do the right thing. There's no ego involved, and therefore no craving for attention. And lastly, there's a lot more, but these are just simple examples that I wanted to share with everyone. Lastly, in traveling the journey of life, Tao cultivators will not try to interfere with what other people are trying to accomplish. So this is particularly true when you are talking about a situation where individuals, fully self-aware adults with agency, are dealing with one another. Then you may think that your friend is wrong in going a particular way with a particular decision, but you give them the respect so that they can proceed using their own best judgment, even if it leads to something pretty horrendous. You can tell them about what you think, but beyond that, you know that you would step over the line into meddling or interference, so you pull back from that. So no interference, no boasting, no showcasing yourself. So these are all elements in the good traveling. And you can already tell it's all about being gentle in words as well as actions. So I'm going to leave this here on screen for the next 5 minutes as we take a mid-meeting break. So now I want to talk about this part of it where the translation, you're going to see where it says, does not leave tracks. Good traveling does not leave tracks. So I want to specifically talk about what that means. That is the reason why many people tune in to discover the meaning of these ancient words. So not leaving tracks in this context means a Tao cultivator, the traveler, the skillful traveler, is able to make progress in a way that is seamless, gentle, and often unnoticed. So this implies a whole bunch of different things. For instance, the passage of the traveler, of the skillful traveler, is not disruptive. It does not cause a problem. It is oftentimes something that many people don't pay attention to, because that particular traveler, being skillful, makes no particular attempt to draw attention. So primarily, what this is talking about is a particular mindset of the Tao cultivator, the mindset of humility, the Tao humility. That is, you don't leave tracks simply from not having to display oneself in an egocentric way. So good things can be accomplished without necessarily drawing attention. So the more accurate way is to say that Tao cultivators, as they travel through life, will be engaged in a bunch of different activities, but as they do so, they will feel no egocentric drive to be highly visible. If what they do happens to draw attention from others, that's fine, that's okay, but it's not their primary goal. So they don't make a particular effort to do any advertising. to grab the spotlight. So that's one aspect of living the skillful life. Let's continue on to look at some of the other examples. So living the skillful life also means line number 2, which is good speech does not seek faults. So you know and I know that someone seeking faults has the ability to ruin your day, has the ability to make things miserable for a whole bunch of people. So Tao cultivators will not be seeking faults. Instead, they will take a different approach. They know, as an example, when you hear someone seeking faults, it will be the typical, okay, who did this? And you know, especially when you're dealing with, for instance, coworkers in the work environment, okay, who did this? That is rarely effective and usually impacts morale in a very negative way. When you've got more of this accusing finger, whenever anything goes wrong, what's going to happen is that people will begin to lose their initiative. They will only do what they're told. They will not proactively do anything that they have not been told, but that they know needs to be done. So when you are a Tao sage or cultivator, you don't point an accusing finger. Instead, you would guide people in the right direction. You will give them a nudge. You will not be resorting to reprimand or scolding. So your communication is focused on the positive. There's positive and negative, but you want to draw the best from people by focusing on the positive and expecting the best from them. That doesn't mean you deny or suppress the reality of the negative. It has to be addressed. But even when Tao cultivators addressed the negative, like, failing to meet a deadline, low level of quality, etc., even when dealing with the negative, they would still attempt to do it from a positive and constructive way, from a positive angle. So they do that by looking for solutions instead of dwelling on the problem. Chances are excellent, and you probably know this from personal experience, that when something goes wrong, pretty much everybody is aware of what the problem is. And what unskillful managers can oftentimes do is to dwell on the mistake, to rehash the details, long past the time when such rehashing will be useful to anyone. You'll find Tao cultivators being the very opposite, that rather than to focus on the problems, it's like, okay, well, we all know what the problem is. Let's talk about how to make it better. Let's talk about how to resolve it. So when you are solution-oriented and when you focus on the positive, there's a magical effect where you can bring the best out from everybody. So the Dalai Lama is known for doing this when he interacts with other people, that he's able to get the best out of them. He is a very advanced master of spirituality, of course, and when he looks at other people, he's expecting the best from them, and he oftentimes gets it. When people interact with him, they naturally feel like they need to be at their very best. So the effect is real. It's like magic, but it's real. Tao cultivators would also refrain from gossip, rumors. They realize that engaging in gossip and rumors will only make things worse. So they would, when they hear about it, they certainly don't try to, teach people a lesson, scolding them about gossip or rumors, telling them not to engage in that. Chances are what you will see from Tao sages and cultivators is that they will hear about a rumor or gossip and they will smile and move on and not pass it on to other people. No boasting, no displays of arrogance, no bragging about yourself. So that would not be good speech. That would not be positive. It's actually quite negative when you showcase yourself as being rather arrogant and maybe too full of yourself. And lastly, no complaints. So complaints gets into the negative territory, and usually people complain for the sake of complaining. That is, they're not really out to solve the issue. They just want to vent their frustration and bitterness. So that doesn't, in the long run, it doesn't do anyone any good. So really the only thing we can do when we identify a problem is to seek ways to remedy the problem, to solve it, make the world a slightly better place. All right, so far we've talked about good traveling, not leaving tracks, meaning that you have a gentle touch. And now, good speech, no seeking faults. So what else? Next, as you can see in the slide, line 3, good reckoning. Good reckoning does not use counters. So let's explore what that means. So counters in this case is how most people keep track of things, keep track of scores. They do this mentally and they want to get even, quote unquote, with other people. So this is what many people do, but Tao cultivators would never do that. They would not try to keep scores. The reason why is because it's already being tracked by the karmic mechanism, which is perfectly natural. It's the natural laws of cause and effect. And karma works in ways that we cannot always perceive. There's going to be a lot of things happening beyond our perception that all contribute to karmic effects. So that being the case, Tao cultivators are very comfortable leaving it up for karma to enact ultimate balance and justice, and they don't feel like they have to be the agent of retribution themselves. So what people do is that they feel like they have to settle the score or even the score. But if you knew that everything will balance out in the long run, then quite naturally, you would not bother with that. Now, here's a trick question, and I do want to invite everyone to provide answers. So specifically about this idea of karmic mechanism, about karma in general, I do see that there's a subtle aspect of it that requires some in-depth analysis, in-depth exploration. So I want to throw a question at you, and I'm going to pause for a moment. It's just to be upfront, I'm going to tell everybody in advance that this is a trick question. So, and if you're not sure, that's okay. No one will see your answer except me. So go ahead and give it a try. Here's the trick question. When it comes to karma, do Tao cultivators focus on creating positive karma? You would think so, right? What could be the harm of creating positive karma? That is the trick question. So I'm going to pause for 1 minute and give everyone a chance to type in their thoughts. Okay, so I have one possible answer about no, don't focus on creating positive karma, focus instead on navigating the Tao. I like that answer. No, because karma is not a commodity for exchange. Very true. Focus on the positive essence. That's actually an excellent answer. And another excellent answer, karma, not controlled by humans. It's only this energy of exchange. That's right. So unbinding karma will be the closest thing. And the energy of karma is something that finds balance in nature. All very good answers, very thoughtful. Tao cultivators naturally generate positive karma by making better choices. That's also quite true. They don't need to go after it as much. Yep, that's true. Tao cultivators don't necessarily need to deliberately, in a contrived way, create positive karma. So, and then we have an excellent question. Well, is that even possible to create karma, like out of nothing? You know, and when you think that you are the creator of positive karma, wouldn't that be a little bit egocentric? These are all fantastic answers. So let me provide some thoughts on that. And this will get into a little bit of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist thinking as well. So my attempt to answer this question, which was posed by a Tao master, is that well, yeah, I think they do. They don't try to do it in a contrived way, but they end up creating positive karma by making, as we have pointed out, by making positive choices. They create positive karma in a natural way. The more important point is that Tao cultivators do not create a positive karma in a targeted way that incurs a specific karmic debt. And I know that's not, on the face of it, that's not really easy to understand. So let me say it in a different way to make it easier to understand. When I say create positive karma in a targeted way, that means you specifically isolate a particular individual to receive the goodness of your positive contribution. When you do so, and especially if you make it known that you are doing this good deed, quote unquote, you've incurred a specific karmic debt. That is, it's like giving some person something good, maybe giving alms to a panhandler, perhaps adopting a child from a third world country. That's very specific. So this receiving person now has a karmic debt to repay. So the karmic mechanism will even things out, which means that when this person does repay the karmic debt, you have to be the recipient of it. So when Buddhist philosophers look at this, they think about this for quite some time, and their conclusion, I think, is interesting. They'll say, and I think it's very true, that we want to liberate ourselves from samsara. So samsara is connected to the Buddhist concept of the bitter ocean, that life being associated with dukkha. translated as dissatisfaction or suffering. That to be in this ocean of misery is to be trapped in samsara, in the wheel of samsara, and that's the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. So the whole idea in spiritual liberation in Buddhism is to free yourself from being chained to the wheel of samsara, so that you no longer need to go through the cycle of birth, death, rebirth. So then what would happen if you were to incur a specific karmic debt is that when that person is ready to repay that karmic debt, you've not only obligated that person to give, you've obligated yourself to receive, which means you are still chained to the wheel of samsara. You have to come back, you have to manifest to receive whatever that returning karma is. So it's a good idea to not incur bad karma so that you don't have to be around, you don't have to come back to suffer the consequence of the negative karma. But it's also, by the same token, a good idea to not obligate someone to you so that you are chained to be the recipient of returning positive karma and having to return because of that. So I know that this is a concept that not many people have heard of in the West, and therefore I want to bring it to you as an example. If you identify yourself as a benefactor in a charitable contribution, and that contribution benefits a particular individual, as I mentioned before, if you adopt a specific person, then you have naturally set yourself up to receive the reciprocal goodness, and then you are tied to the wheel of samsara. The better way, in my opinion, the better way is to make your charitable contributions to a cause, not to an individual. That way, you still create a positive karma, but without incurring a specific debt. That is, the goodness does not come back to you from a particular person, but in a generally positive way that has a good effect on your existence overall. You will then be free in that respect. You will not be chained to samsara. You'll be free of the cycle. And in the Buddhist terminology, you're not obligating yourself to manifest dharmically to receive the positive karma that comes back to you. Kind of a different way to think, sort of a different perspective, the Eastern perspective, which is, I think, not that well known. So let's move on. We're now looking at the two lines. These are two of my favorite lines from this particular chapter and from the entire Tao Te Ching. So these two lines say, good closure needs no bar and yet cannot be opened. Good knot needs no rope and yet cannot be untied. So let's talk about these two lines. They are both very important. And I want to start out with the bar that you see here. So in ancient times, in ancient Chinese culture, before the invention of lock, if you think about locks and keys, that requires metal works, it requires a sophisticated level of being able to work with tools. So prior to that, you could still keep double doors locked by setting a wooden bar between them. So that prevents it from being open from the other side. So that's the bar we're talking about here. So the idea is that there are people on the other side of the double door, and if you put a bar there, then that door won't open. If you set a bar horizontally across, that door won't open and people won't be able to get out. So that's the overall idea. If the door was open, it means people are able to exit and leave. In the context of your life, this means people who are with you will depart, will go away and not be associated with you. Okay, so that's the context of exiting and leaving. So we have oftentimes seen, you and I have oftentimes seen, that as we go through life, people leave a situation. You know, maybe they leave a workplace, they quit. Maybe they leave a marriage, they get a divorce. Maybe they leave a relationship, perhaps a friendship, and they maybe break up with someone, or they end communication with someone, they cut that person off, basically. Today, I think younger people would say they ghost, they're ghosting, they disappear like a ghost. So whatever the case may be, when that situation deteriorates at a certain point, people decide to cut their loss and go away. So that's the context of leaving. Apply that back to line 4 that we're talking about right now. It says good closure needs no bar and yet cannot be open. What that is saying is that you're not using any artificial means to keep people close to you, and yet they would never imagine leaving. This is another way to say that you have established such a good, powerful relationship with people in your life that they would not be able to get too far away from you without coming back. Or to say, another way is to say they're always with you. They're not going anywhere. They're always by your side. So let's make that more explicit. Here's my statement on that. Tao cultivators create positive, healthy relationships. So people naturally choose to stick around of their own free will. So now, hopefully, it makes sense to you when I say there's no bar to lock the door, and yet the door cannot be open. Well, it cannot be open because the people who are with you, they love you. They would never be able to imagine leaving you. What is keeping them with you is not a bar, but the deep feelings, the connections that you share with them. So it is as if they're locked in, but the door isn't locked by the wooden bar or any other device. It is locked, it's not locked at all, but it is as if it has been locked, and the lock is human emotions, human connections, deep feelings. Why is that? Well, here's the bottom line. This works. This always works. This is part of the Tao of humanity for the simple reason that everyone wants to belong to a good team. It's deeply embedded in human nature, and another way to say it is a good family. When you're in if you end up working at a good place and there's excellent morale, there's good connection between coworkers, oftentimes the collection of coworkers begin to regard themselves as a family at work, as a family that sticks together. That's a good team. And when you find something good, well, naturally, you can't imagine yourself leaving. When people create that with you and cannot imagine themselves leaving, Yeah, you can't beat them off with a stick. They're always with you. So you can see that this is a very worthwhile aspiration in the Tao, is to create such powerful, strong connections. So then the next line, line 5, is going to be a different way to express the same idea. Let's take a look. So just by understanding line 4, there's stuff that you can figure out about line 5. The two lines form a mini subunit. So even before digging into line 5, you can deduce that, well, chances are this line most likely about relationship as well. And you will be correct. And you can also deduce that just as we have used doors and the bar to lock the door as metaphors, they're not meant to be literal. They're metaphors to talk about human connections. This right here about ropes and knots, these would also be metaphoric. It's another metaphor. It's a visual to help us remember the lesson, so we know it's not literally about knots and ropes. It's about more than that. It's about how we deal with one another, how we connect with one another, how we befriend people, how we keep that friendship going. So the knot literally is the connection we make with one another. A good knot is an emotional tie that binds. So I'm sure this is coming into clearer focus. So what I would like to do is to ask everyone to imagine that if you were to master this particular Tao, that you are able to make a connection that is so strong that it's like a knot that cannot be untied. So when you have a relationship or friendship like that, you have a connection that persists even when you don't see the other person for a while, even when you're out of communication for a while. When you are able to reconnect and get caught up, it feels like that person has never left. And the reason for that is because you are still tied by this invisible rope, not a physical rope, but an emotional rope, so to speak. And because of that connection, regardless of how far apart you may be physically, as measured by geographical distance, you know that sooner or later, you're going to come back and be reunited, be together again. And then you know that you'll be spending some time getting caught up, telling one another all about the time that you've been away. So that's another aspect of this powerful connection between people. So now the question. Yes, I think all of us looking at these two descriptions, understanding what they mean, we would all find ourselves naturally saying that, yeah, definitely, I want more of that. How can I have such powerful connections in my life? How can I bring that into manifestation in my reality? So what we have studied so far in just one section out of several, in this section, Lao Tzu is already telling us the 3 primary ways. And you can tell it's the first 3 lines of this section. The good traveling, good speech, and good reckoning. So let's count them up. How do we create such great connections with people? 1, good traveling. You take beneficial yet seamless actions that you are able to do everything in the spirit of the Tao with a gentle touch, with soft-spoken words. Soft-spoken words leading us to good speech, and these words are positive and encouraging, bring out the best in people. And then good reckoning. Good reckoning is that you're not tracking scores, you're not keeping track, you're not trying to get even with anyone, you're relaxed and easygoing. So no shrewdness, no being exacting. This can apply to your family, that if you want stronger, more powerful connection with your kids, with other members of your family, with your perhaps friends, co-workers, particularly co-workers who become value members of your team, you will certainly want to create a better connection, stronger connection with them. So we have specific instructions actually on how to create that. All right, so this is getting good. Let's continue on. We're done with the first 5 lines for the time being. Let's talk about line 6. Line 6 says, therefore, sages often save others. And so do not abandon anyone. Let's focus on 救人, which means save people, save other people. I've highlighted those 2 characters in the Chinese that you see above, and then you'll see it at the bottom. So what does it mean to save people like a superhero? No. In this context, to save people means to provide guidance, to help them stay on the right path. That's actually the best gift that anyone can give to others, is to keep them on the right path in the journey of life. So you can see here that the metaphor of the life journey, of living one's life and comparing that to taking on a long journey, that's actually quite heavy throughout this entire chapter. So help people stay on the right path. That's saving them when they stray away from the Tao. You want to bring them back. Now, I want to be very clear that in the ancient context, when Lao Tzu said to save people, it's not about religion. There's no religious context here. There's no recognition 2,500 years ago of the idea that you have to save someone's soul from eternal damnation. So salvation in that sense. So that's not what's being talked about here. It's only about living life right, which can apply to anyone from any religious background. So just because it talks about saving people, let's be careful not to mix it up with the usual context of saving people in our Judeo-Christian society. So now, keep the previous 5 lines in mind about the good traveling, the good speech, the good reckoning, and also, about how we walk the right path. Combine this with the previous lines, and you can see, especially lines 4 and 5, about the doors, the ropes, the knots, all about creating that powerful binding relationship. If you combine this, saving people, with those lines, you can see that the sage helps people by building a strong personal relationship. Even before talking about the Tao or nudging people or guiding people on the right path, even before that, you have to build a strong relationship. That is the starting point. Now we move on to line 7. Do not abandon anyone. So the 3 characters that I have highlighted there, very easy to see. These mean the same thing in modern times as they did in ancient times. 无弃人. So the first character means without. The second character means to abandon or discard. And then the last character means person or people. So without discarding people, without abandoning people, so you can see that the translation is pretty literal. So why does it say that? Well, what Laozi is trying to express is that there's value in everyone. Laozi believes everyone has the potential to be better, and therefore he says Tao sages would not discard people, would not abandon people. That the Tao sage, Laozi, would always want to help people regardless of their present situation. And now it's time to talk about how this relates to a Buddhist perspective. When we talked about karma before, it's important for me to also mention that at the time the Tao Te Ching was written 2,500 years ago, there was no explicit concept of karma, no term like karma for the Tao cultivators. However, they understood the concept quite easily because they thought of the functioning of the Tao as being circular. So good energy going out, good energy coming back in, bad energy is going out, bad energy coming back in circular fashion. So they knew about karma without using that specific term. Hundreds of years later, when Buddhism spread to China, the term karma received easy acceptance because of that similarity in conception. So other terms, other similarities also help the ancient Chinese accept the Buddhism concepts that they are now trying to digest from ancient India. So this is one of them. The sages see value in everyone. The sages believe everyone has the potential to be better. They don't give up on anyone. This matches the Buddhist concept that everyone has Buddha nature. Buddha nature is the potential to be enlightened. So quite literally, everyone has the potential to become a Buddha within, and all that it would take is the appropriate work to awaken the Buddha that is slumbering inside of you even as we speak. So all sentient beings possess this ability to one day become Buddha, and that's also important to note that in the ancient, traditional, authentic conception of the Buddha is not a deity and is merely one of many. Buddha is just a human being who has awakened to a greater spiritual reality. That's it, not a deity with supernatural powers. So here, as you can see, it's very similar. Buddhist teachings thought of Buddha nature as being inherent in absolutely everybody. You know, even the most heinous criminal, it doesn't matter. That person still has Buddha nature and one day can awaken to enlightenment, compassion, greater realization of everything. So let's move on. Let's now go from from people to things. In line 8 and line 9, you're going to see that the sages save things and do not abandon anything. So I've highlighted those characters here so we can look into it more deeply. So the sage takes nothing for granted and does not let things go to waste. So this is depicting a very conserving and thrifty mindset. Very frugal. And here, as we're talking about saving things and saving people, it is also important for us to recall back to mind, once again, the yin and yang symbol. And to remind all of us, we should remind ourselves that in the Tao, it is always true that the sage will strike the right balance with things as they do with people. So in saving people, not discarding people, in saving things, not discarding things, balance and moderation prevail. And the yin and yang symbol reminds us of that. What this means is neither abandon or impose on people. You don't discard people. They have worth. They are intrinsically valuable. They all have the potential to become the Buddha. So you don't discard them. You don't abandon them. At the same time, to balance it out, you would also not impose on them. It could be that people are just not ready for your help. Maybe not ready for the Tao. When that is the case, the best thing that you can do is simply nothing and wait for the right time. When they are ready to accept help, when they specifically ask you for your help. So that's moderation in action. You don't abandon people and you don't impose on them. It's similar with things. Neither waste nor hoard things. So you can be frugal in utilizing your resources. At the same time, you would also balance it out by letting go of things that don't serve a useful purpose. And you do that so there's no clutter in your life. You don't hang on to things because one day, perhaps, it'll become valuable. And we know that this one day never actually comes. So when it comes to saving, discarding people and things, you can tell that the yin and yang symbol is ever present in the background. Okay, we now come to line 10. This is an important line to talk about carefully because we've got two characters here, Xi Ming. The last two characters, you can tell that the translation, following enlightenment. So following enlightenment is a central concept in this chapter, but it is often mistranslated. So let me break them down, starting with the last character, Ming. This oftentimes gets mistranslated as bright. Bright is actually 亮 in Mandarin, not 明. 明 means clear, to be able to see clearly, to have clarity. So in this context, it's all about spiritual clarity. It's all about enlightenment, being able to see reality as it is. So light is close, but not quite right. It's not light. Light would be 光. So 明 means clear. And the first character there, Xi, it means to follow. So in ancient times, it was more common than modern times to use this character to mean to follow, to follow a pattern, as an example, to carry on as before, to conform, or to inherit. So that's the context that this means. in modern times, that context is not very much used anymore. It's mostly the other meaning, which is to surprise attack or to raid. So translators who know one side of this character but not the other side are oftentimes caught trying to justify, because they can't understand. To them, it makes no sense to say, launch a surprise attack on clarity. That obviously is not what Lao Tzu was trying to say. So Lao Tzu wasn't trying to say to conduct a raid on clarity. That wouldn't be it either. But then translators who don't know the other context have no idea. So they try to use words like embody or embrace, which is not what their dictionary tells them, but they don't know. Fortunately, now you know. It means to follow. So when you put this together, to follow enlightenment, what is that? The idea is that you follow in the footsteps of enlightened individuals who have set great examples in the past. So in Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu oftentimes refers to the ancient masters who have set a great example for us, for him, at his time, 2,500 years ago. Well, it's the same for us. He followed the masters who were ancient to him. We follow the Tao masters who are ancient to us. So that's what following enlightenment really is, walking in the footsteps of great Tao sages, Tao masters in the past. So here we are at the bottom of line 10. We have a lot more to talk about from line 11 onward, but I see that we're getting close to the end of the meeting. So it is now time to take a look at the summary. The summary that I have for everyone today has to do with the first part. The first part of this chapter, remember, it talks about creating this deep, meaningful, strong connection with other people. So I think you would want to know, as I would, this question. This slide here about the 3 ways to create or strengthen great relationships with the people in your life. So this is advice straight from Lao Tzu. Let's start with good traveling. So remember, good traveling, what that means is to do the right thing with a light touch. Walk the positive path without the need to be seen in a positive way. So I think everyone understands what I mean by a light touch. I mean a gentle touch. I don't mean, do the right thing superficially. That's the context in chapter 26. And we're rather limited in English with our choice of vocabulary words. So we have to, and we oftentimes talk about using a light touch in dealing with a difficult or tricky situation. So we still have to do that here. But I think you know what I mean. To do the right thing is oftentimes something that requires thoughtful consideration. So it's actually on the heavy side of the spectrum. Let's continue on. Number 2, you remember what it is? It is good speech. So what the takeaway from Lao Tzu to us is to be gentle, not just with your actions, but also in your words. Gentle words. So refrain from complaints that are not constructive, refrain from scolding, accusations, recriminations. Those would not be what Laozi calls good speech, and those would not be building strong relationships. You may feel the need to lash out in anger at other people. Just know that when you do so, you are damaging relationship, oftentimes beyond the possibility of repair. Number 3, good reckoning. So good reckoning is about keeping track of scores. So the third way to create great relationships or strengthen great relationships is to realize there's no need to keep track of scores. The Tao itself will balance everything out perfectly. So no need to try to do it on your own. We can't possibly compare to the Tao mechanism when it comes to bringing everything into balance. It always does that. There are no exceptions. We can rely upon it. So there you go. These are the 3 ways to create or strengthen great relationships with the people in your life. As you apply these ideas, I would be very interested in learning about the results that you have accomplished. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.